everybody, and welcome to the Rebel Show. I'm glad you could join us this week. It's been a good week. There's a lot going on. I went hunting, which turned into more of just like hanging out, but sometimes that happens, But hope everyone's doing good. It's a good time. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're telling your friends and sharing, because we're trying to spread the message. We're trying to grow. And it's important to find people that you like and spread the word. And if you don't like them, don't spread the word. But we have fun. So I want to talk a little bit about like the intentions of freedom. We're in a position in our country right now where it's like it's war with what the truth is and what to believe, and both sides are at each other. It's like war, and there's violence and there's chaos. We're moving into a chaos state, I think. You see it all over the place. And I think it's part of it, as we move towards what we need to move towards, it's going to be chaotic and it's going to be crazy. And I've said it before, and we know, and we see it. And in 1 Timothy 2, it talks about, while there are many physical benefits to living in a free country, the spiritual benefits that exist are greater and more important. There's a lot of benefits to it, but it's talking about God's laws versus man's laws. We've done talks about this before, where God's laws are greater than man's laws. But God's laws are greater and are more important. And that's something we got to remember, is when our founders built the country the way they did, they built it on things God showed them, off his laws, how man should be free and man should be able to make the decisions he needs to make for his life, and shouldn't be limited or controlled, or should be limited, but shouldn't be controlled by a government. A government should be limited and should be limited by what the people want. So they based a lot of the things they did off of things they learned in Scripture, Another scripture in 1 Timothy 2 says, 2:2 says, "For kings and all who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity." So it's talking about kings, ruling the proper way, with authority, but with godliness and dignity. These are qualifications of our leaders. Galatians 5:13 says, "For you were called to freedom." Brethren, only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another. It's a good point. We're called to be free. We're called to live a life to pursue the things we want, but don't let the freedom to do what we want to do, like infringe someone else's rights or wrong other people or make laws that infringe other people's rights. We have freedom and we should live in freedom, but it should be limited and it should be policed by ourselves. We police ourselves. That's how we get there. That's how this constitutional republic works, is we police ourselves. And when we depend on government to do everything for us or fix everything for us, we're just asking for trouble. It's up to us. We, the people, police ourselves. And then we let our representatives know what we want. The early colonists, they were British citizens, and they had a charter, which was like a letter guaranteeing their right to exist and do the things they needed to do. So they were British citizens, and they were colonizing a new area. And that's what they went over to, what became the United States, is to explore it and colonize it and like grow. And part of it was because there was religious oppression. But like the king, like he threw out those protective degrees that he put out. He forgot about the colonists and started to change the way he thought, and he pushed taxes and allowed the military to wrongly attack and even murder British citizens. And he declared martial law in some areas and burned the city of Charleston to the ground. This is what the king is allowing to happen to his own people. And as citizens, they were entitled to the same laws and freedoms as everyone in Britain enjoyed. They were the same people, just in a different place. They were in a different area. And the king had turned his back on these people, and the colonists tried many times to communicate with the king and to tell him, hey, this is wrong. You guys got to stop doing this to us. They reminded the king that, hey, we're British citizens. We have the right to do this. We aren't some foreign entity here. We're your people. And the king pushed back. And after a while, the colonists had had enough. And the king, he disbanded the local governments. And he allowed the military to wreak havoc. And the colonists decided, hey, we're done with this. We're declaring an independence. And they decided, hey, we're going to risk it all. It's worth it for freedom. Instead of being under tyranny, we're giving everything, our lives, our fortunes, and our families. They risked it all. And they fought against tyranny. Tyranny is a cruel and a dictatorial, oppressive government. There's a lot of leaders like that in the world, like Vlad the Impaler. That's a really rough one. That guy was nuts. You should look him up. Like Kim Jong-il, he starved and killed millions. Saddam Hussein, everybody remembers him. 2 million deaths under his watch at least. Pol Pot executed 2.5 million for not following his ideas. That's tyranny. That's a cruel and dictatorial, oppressive leader. Joseph Stalin launched a government program that would make the country more progressive, which led to the starvation of nearly 10 million people. Stalin launched the Great Purge, killing people who opposed him and his ideas. This is rough, right? Hitler, 17 million. Hopefully I can pronounce this one. Mao Zedong, 4 to 6 million sentenced to death. 20 million starved. It's rough. There's a lot more of these leaders out there. And we just got to, if you go read up on some of these, it'll blow your mind how many deaths. That's a lot of deaths. I should have added all those up, but that's a lot. It's important to know and teach and remember history so that we can learn from the world's past mistakes and not repeat them. Not just our personal mistakes, but the world's past mistakes. The founding era colonists were biblical-knowing Christians. They quoted the Bible more than 70% of the time, more than any other book. They knew the Bible. They used the Geneva Bible. And they knew it so well, they didn't always quote reference. They just referred to Scripture or quoted portions of Scripture, and everybody knew what it was, so they didn't have to explain where it was, They knew the Bible and were able to recognize a tyrant early and were able to defend themselves. And they knew what qualified a godly leader. When you know God's ways, God's laws, evil is very easy to spot. A counterfeit's very easy to spot. And these people saw it coming and they tried to negotiate, but you can't negotiate with a terrorist. So you know what? They had to go to war. Exodus 18:21 gives us some of those qualifications. I read a few earlier. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, and hating covetousness, or basically greed. And, I lost my place. The founders knew how to build the government to keep away from the type of leadership that would come in and take over and rule your life and not let you rule your life. The colonists built a limited government that was ruled by the people's consent. That's the important thing, is the people have to consent. You can't just pass a law. That's why we have a constitutional republic with representation. So any law that's made without the consent of the people and outside of the Constitution is a tyrannical act. And we see this more and more nowadays. It's one of those things where leadership takes itself and says, hey, we're smarter than you, we're better than you, we know more than you, and we'll handle it. You guys just hang out and pay your taxes. Oh, and by the way, we need more of those. And it's wrong. The founders knew that people in power would tend to want more power. That's why a lot of these positions in government are limited. So we've got to stand and make sure we put our voice out there, because a government that's looking to take more and more from us and tricking us or talking us into believing that it's good and teaching our children that things that are not God's ways are good is going to destroy a constitutional republic. We got to make sure that we do our part and vote, and we should be able to have the freedom to talk about this with other people. And if they disagree, great, fine. But if they will talk back, have the talk, have the banter, communicate, pass ideas around. Social media is out there trying to limit what we do. And we've got to remember the founding reasons behind this government is to keep us from types of government that would take everything from us. And we're leaning towards that now. We're leaning towards a government that really just wants to take over everything. And there's a lot of people that want that. And it doesn't end well. It never has ended well, and it will never end well. It always ends with slavery. We overcame slavery in the United States. Why go back there? Why vote in leadership that'll make us slaves again? So I say this, vote out the Democratic mob. Thank you very much.